you can start to offer these constraints that help to understand what is the problem you're trying to solve, what is your boundary, what are those guardrails in which to really go and define that problem, and how far is the organizational appetite for change? How far are you able to push? How much opportunity to drive a different outcome is there? Problem framing. When I think about doing the exercises that we've covered already, this is actually one of the most heavy lifting parts of the design thinking process, right? It requires an awful lot of iterative problem statement crafting. It requires alignment with your business leaders on what problem is it really that we're going after, because ultimately they're going to be the ones funding your project and funding the solutions that come out of there, and allowing those to continue to be refined and to allow the prototypes to go into testing, and they're going to be funding all of that. So making sure that you have that alignment up front with them is really important. And it's not a one and done kind of experience. I actually bucket about 30% of the time that I'd use for design thinking projects associated with problem definition and problem framing, because getting the right problem is so important to getting better solutions that are really focused on your users. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about challenging assumptions. Why does this matter so much? Right. Challenging assumptions is a really fundamental part of the problem framing exercise as well. And what I'd like you to do is watch this clip from The West Wing.
Hey. We spent millions of dollars developing a pen for the astronauts that would work in zero gravity. You know what the Russians did?
Used a pencil?
They used a pencil.
All right, now that you've watched the video, they talk in there about the space pen, right? What did the Russians do? They just used a pencil. And so whether or not that's a true or a fictional story, the example is really a good one, right? So if you're given the problem of go build a space pen, and it might not be safe inside your organization for you to raise your hand and say, well, I don't know, what is it that we're really trying to do? If the goal is to build a space pen, that leads me down a very different path than if I back up, if I abstract the question a little bit more and say, is the goal to be able to write in space? If the problem framed is how might we find a way to be able to write in space, rather than how might we build a space pen, you end up in very different directions, right? And in this case, they say the Russians used a pencil. So I think the fact that we're being asked to build a space pen is actually driven by two things. First is, if it's not safe for you to raise your hand and push back on your leader inside of your business, I think you end up in a really different dynamic, and maybe you end up going down the path of building a space pen. But if you have the opportunity to say, I don't know, let's challenge our assumptions around the problem for a little bit, and to poke holes in it and to go through multiple iterations of the problem statement, maybe you get to a broader statement that talks about what must be true, or how might we create a way to write in space, which is much more broad, which invites things like the pencil, or things like chalk, or things like a crayon, right? Different kinds of things that aren't necessarily dependent on gravity. Some of those solutions might have some additional challenges with them as well. So if I did a little more digging on the space pen, I'd learn that chalk has some dust that floats around in the air. Pencils, there's microparticles there too. So there are some attribute challenges with some of the solutions that aren't necessarily grounded in space pen. However, you can work through those. Are those issues easier to solve than building a space pen? I don't know. Why do we spend time talking about this in problem framing? Because it really matters. The problem that you're trying to solve informs the potential set of solutions in which are considered as you go about solving your challenges. And so a lot of that is grounded in challenging the assumptions. One, is the problem that I've been given the real problem that I need to go and solve? Two, have we looked at it a bit more broadly? Three, is the opportunity exist where the opposite may also be true? How do we bring more of that to life as a mindset in the organization, as a method of design thinking, and for you, a practitioner sitting in a business where somebody has paid for you to come and go to training and come and learn about design thinking? How can you apply more of this to your everyday business such that the culture inside the organization starts to change and you can bring more of this to life? example, right? This is a great template to consider using in your business. It's a really simple sketch, right? But if you think about the problem framing, if you've been given the problem of the elevator is too slow, what's the default solution that comes to mind? Wow, let's make the elevator faster. But if you go and you observe people using an elevator, is their frustration really that the elevator is too slow? Or is the problem that the wait is actually really annoying, right? This is similar to the airline example I shared with you earlier. How might you think differently about maybe making the wait feel shorter? In this case, play music, put up mirrors, install a hand sanitizer, do some different things to take the attention off of doing nothing while you're waiting for the elevator that makes the time pass a little faster, right? There's some other ways to think about crafting a problem statement and tackling that. And you can see here that the way the problem is crafted informs the possible solutions to be considered. In the former, it's very narrow. If the elevator is too slow, how might we make the elevator faster? If the wait is annoying, how do you make the wait feel shorter? And there's a whole cascade of ideas and solutions that can come from that as well.